Hello everybody, welcome to a comprehensive look at the 1.0 version of Nightreign. If you are new to this, it is a series where we take an in-depth look at the unpatched disc versions of the From Software games. We have covered Elden Ring, Demon's Souls Remake, and Bloodborne so far, with Dark Souls 1 coming later this year. Given Nightreign is intended to primarily be a multiplayer game, it was never a certainty that an unpatched install of the game would be playable whatsoever. But given the existence of this video, you can assume we're good to go. If you're unaware, a 1.0 version of a game, in today's context, is just a version of the game that was printed into the discs that were shipped to stores. And you can play this version by installing the disc straight into the console without downloading whatever online updates are available for the game. And for the specific game's context, 1.0 versions generally can't connect to the online servers, so this does mean I'll have to clear everything solo. For visual indicators of differences between versions, when I'm showing footage of changes present in the 1.0 version that differ from what is currently available through updates, I will have a label saying 1.00 in the top right corner of the video. And when showing footage of the launched game, being at least day 1 patch, there will be a release label in the top right corner as well. I may use the words release or launch interchangeably to refer to this version, just know it's the same thing. I may occasionally refer to the network test as well to make some extra comparisons there, and that will also have a network test label in the top right. That should be all. Let's get into it. The first change is pretty much right away, and it's a very comical one. In 1.0, you get the pre-order gesture during the very first cutscene once you boot up a save file. In the released version, you get it as soon as you get control of your character in the tutorial window. Of course, you'll only be able to experience this if you pre-ordered your physical copy of the game. The church in the tutorial, where you spawn in, is highlighted in the map as if it had a flask in it, when obviously you can't retrieve a flask from it. At release, it does have that grayed out icon like it will in regular gameplay, as if the flask has already been retrieved. This detail will become relevant again soon. The near-death symbols on the bottom right are a little bit different. If you see the Duchess's near-death icon, it's completely gray, and it's really hard to see due to bitrate limitations, and probably even worse from YouTube compression, but it also has a thin red border around it. It's strange that it's red, because it looks like her designated color during the tutorial is supposed to be green. As for instance, when my character dies, the border is blue as the corresponding color. In release, the whole icon is shaded a little bit more with the designated color. After reviving her, I noticed that the Duchess's model is a bit shiny, almost as if she was wet. Pause. My guess is that the implication is that she died from the rain, but I don't think the rain does that to your model even in 1.0, much less the release version. Morgoth seems a little easier to kill in 1.0 compared to the release version. Even if it's not by a ton, numbers wise, you can definitely feel it when you're playing it, as 1.0 is the first time I defeated Morgoth in this game. This is a harder thing to measure, but I believe Duchess dies a lot quicker in the tutorial. By that meaning that she might have less HP of course, or lower defenses. She didn't seem to take a lot of punishment before falling compared to release version. The near death bars refresh themselves so much faster than they do in release version. They'll almost immediately start refilling if you stop attacking, which certainly makes it much more difficult to even have a chance to revive in a combat scenario due to the stamina bar. Certainly happy it's not this bad at launch, and thankfully for me, as there's no multiplayer available in 1.0, I won't have to deal with it. Duchess doesn't really seem to want to help you if you fall in 1.0 tutorial. At least with the patch I recorded this in, she seems to drop everything she's doing to revive you, and I think even Morgoth pacifies to allow her to do it. But in 1.0, she just completely ignored me, at least in this run. After your first death in this tutorial fight, your bloodstain will be inside the boss arena, where it'll be around where you find Duchess in release version. The cutscene that plays after the tutorial is mostly the same for the first chunk, but after the Nightlord does not rest bit, 1.0 is missing a chunk of the cutscene.
The Nightlord does not rest. As it ravages the lands between beyond recognition. But there are those who would fight back. The Nightfarers. Brought together by happenstance, their commonalities are but few. No shared station, era, or even purpose. Yet together, they are bound by a will. The will to cross the endless night and fight on. Till every shred of their being is ground away. Alas, the curtain may be drawing to a close upon this world. Alas, the curtain may be drawing to a close upon this world.
The fighting background sound effects during the cutscene start at a different point for the corresponding segments.
As it ravages the lands between beyond recognition. There are those who would fight back. The Nightfarers. Brought together by happenstance, their commonalities are but few. No shared station, era, or even purpose. Yet together, they are bound by a will. The will to cross the endless night and fight on.
Once in the Roundtable Hold, the priestess gives you the "Our Formless Master" dialogue early, during your first chat with her while you're still sitting.
This message is for you. You will hear it often. Seekers of redemption. On the third night, this land will fall. Band together and prepare to claim the life of the Nightlord. That is all.
She won't repeat this part of the dialogue again, ironically resulting in not hearing it often. She also gives you the rest of the "Our Formless Master" dialogue after your first talk option with her, but it adds these few lines.
The coming war cannot be won with determination alone. Thus, we are well provisioned. Ensure you have all you need before leaving for battle. Oh.
It may be from a different dialogue tree, I'm not sure, but it can be repeated in the About Roundtable Hold option. Since we're in dialogue, I'll get this out of the way now. After you come back from your first expedition, maybe failed one too, I'm unsure, the Ask About Nightlord prompt with a priestess never showed up, as far as I could find, which describes Gladius a bit. In the main menu, when you press start, there's no tab for relics or key items at all. You'll see soon that it's not a super big deal for 1.0 specifically, but of course, it is a change regardless. After coming back from your second expedition, you'll usually get the visual codex tutorial, but that never popped up as far as I could see in 1.0 version, though the codex itself is there and usable in 1.0. Speaking of usability, I did go check the journal for the memory storylines, of course. It wasn't available, and unfortunately, it never actually became available at all during the whole playthrough. So as far as I can tell, it looks like the journal may not have been added yet whenever the 1.0 version was printed. If it is somehow locked behind something else, and it is available in this version, feel free to let me know in the comments. But after around 25 hours of messing around in 1.0, I never unlocked it. So if this is the case, it's certainly the biggest piece of missing content so far. Looking at the character interactions here in the roundtable, in the beginning, when the guardian is in this spot, moving his wing, if you talk to him, the sound effect of the wing moving still keeps playing during the dialogue, despite him not moving the wing.
Anything troubling you? I can help.
In none of the executor's interactions does the little dialogue window describe what he's doing. He just has the usual ... In the relic's altar, for changing them out, if you're modifying the relic of another character that isn't your currently selected one, it gives you an option to change to that character you change the relics of when leaving the altar. It makes sense, but it can certainly be annoying. Changing characters is fast enough as it is, so I'm kinda glad they changed it for release. Personally, I'm usually either changing all characters' relics, or just the one I'm already on, so it's not that helpful for me. Since we're talking about changing out characters, time to look at the character differences. I didn't find any real differences from Wilder, Recluse, Guardian, or Raider. So going into Iron Eye, the mark you leave with your character skill has a different design. It also doesn't deepen in color as you hit the mark, and when procced, it disappears instantly instead of opening up and fading away. This one goes more into actual expedition gameplay, but I feel like it affects Iron Eye the most directly. I never really found any of the adds X element or X status effect to weapons. Like, you can get weapons with different elements or statuses than the weapon normally has, but for bows specifically, I never really found any elemental bows. This is tricky because this could entirely be that I got unlucky, and there is weapon spawns like that. But trust me, I did try to farm like fire bows for a little while, so at best they're just a lot rarer, which is also a change. But at worst, you just can't get bows with elements that aren't in its corresponding weapon, like horn bows for magic, which does mean you have to rely on grease a lot more. For Executor, the custom R2s on katanas for him are different animations from the release version. Definitely looks a lot less polished and probably not as good. The Curse Blade image on the equipment HUD doesn't have the red border around it, it's just a normal layout. This actually goes for all weapons that have a higher status level or upgrade, like the rare and legendary armaments. Those also have a normal border in the HUD. The Curse Sword stance just looks like a normal idle animation from other weapons, including when you walk, but this just looks like you're slow walking instead of having the unique animations. You can't run out of the Curse Sword stance with L3 to sheath it. You have to trigger the button combo again, which is definitely annoying. That's it for Executor. Now we're gonna jump ahead to characters unlocked later. Duchess's weapon buff lasts a lot less than it does in release, but this actually goes for all weapon buffs as far as I can tell. The only other change I could see is that with the relic, where after ending a weapon combo, it'll automatically do the restage skill. It doesn't do the clock sound effect for that, where obviously it does in release. And finally for Revenant, this is the wildest change. Buckle up. So as you know, the way you unlock Revenant currently is by unlocking Duchess first, then buying the besmirched frame, and finally confronting Revenant's Phantom in this corner of the Roundtable Hold. Well, while playing 1.0, I went through all these steps as soon as I could, and kept checking throughout the entire playthrough, but I never found her Phantom in this corner. I checked everywhere in the Roundtable to see if maybe she was moved to a different spot, but nothing. After pretty much giving up and assuming she wasn't in the game, despite some evidence that she might be in there, such as relics that are only equipable by her still being there, I decided to do a Hail Mary and ask on Reddit whether someone happened to know how to unlock her. I didn't have much expectations, as being a primarily online game, I didn't expect many people to either purposely or not to be playing this game in 1.0 version. And I don't mind missing things in these videos, but missing an entire character would definitely be something very major to miss. So I decided to try asking anyway. No one seemed to know on Reddit, but I did also post a question here on a YouTube post, and one hero stepped up. User Hollow Knight 6438 let me know that you can get her by redoing the tutorial through the codex, and she will be there instead of Morgott. First of all, I didn't even know you could redo the tutorial to this. Secondly, I had noticed an exclamation mark icon on the codex map icon for a long time, but I just assumed it was bugged. And not knowing you can redo the Morgott encounter, I just didn't even think to do this. But once I tried it, yeah, she was there. You were locked to only using Walder just like the tutorial, and are pretty much doing everything the same way, except you fight her at the end instead of Morgott. You get one revive just like the Morgott tutorial, but if you die a second time, you will have to redo this, being somehow more obnoxious to redo than the release version. But a very clear reason for why they changed this later on. The only difference specifically from the tutorial scenario, outside of the obvious, is that Duchess isn't there to help you this time. You've probably already noticed a few differences just from watching the footage, so let's get into the differences with the fight itself. Firstly, her model seems to be a little more purple hued than she would be in release version. Perhaps she's supposed to represent the condemned you can fight in Limveld or something. Secondly, you probably noticed she doesn't have her summons out during the fight, like she does in release. And yeah, as far as my fights with her are concerned, she never summoned him at all. I guess she respects dual etiquettes in this version. I don't know. She also used the Wraith Calling Bell during this fight version, which I haven't seen her use in the release version at least. That's all I noticed for her acquisition fight, so now to her moveset as the player. I noticed that her claws have a wind effect around them in 1.0, where it's a pretty solid slash in release. The HUD for the summons is completely different than at launch. The overlay doesn't have buttons for each summon, instead they are in a layout that corresponds to the button placements on your controller. So the L1, or left bumper, summon is on the left side, and the other two are on the right for the other two buttons. I almost like it more than the current layout, since it's at least a little more instant, being able to determine which summon is for which side of the controller at the very least. but I do wish they also had the buttons on there, just so the order on the right side is more clear. The harp doesn't go away after summoning one of them. You either have to cancel it via the same button combo to do the skill, or roll out of it. You can't run out of it. As for the summons themselves, they seem similar enough as far as I could tell. The only thing I noticed is that when they are felled, in 1.0, it takes around 50 seconds for you to be able to summon them again, instead of 35-ish seconds at release. And finally, now that we have all the characters unlocked, I want to show that the character selection screen shows the 3D models of the characters in real time, as their hair and clothes move, rather than being a render of the models like they are in a release version. They also seem to be in slightly different angles, generally not as good of a pose. Looking at the expedition selection window, you may immediately be able to spot that the expeditions have literally no information outside of the name. To be clear, it was also like this in the network test, but at least there was only one boss in that one, and it's obviously a beta type situation of sorts, so it's crazy that they didn't think to add anything. As you can guess from context clues and my tone, this will remain for the rest of the expeditions as well. But alright, that's all for the hub area stuff. Let's actually get into Limveld for the first time proper for the Tricephalos expedition. Your player icon is different in 1.0, mostly just via the outer circle being closer to the inner one. The upper left icon in the HUD doesn't give you feedback letting you know that you can level up. This was like this in the network test as well. The Spirit Spring designs on the map are much more purple in color instead of blue. And once you go to the Spirit Spring, you can see that they are also way more purple in the overworld as well. When you retrieve a Crimson Flask from the church altars, it doesn't play the visual effect that would play later on. As I alluded to in the beginning, whenever the flask is retrieved, the church icon on the map won't be grayed out at all, so you basically have to keep track of which ones you've already gotten yourself. The order of the items the merchant sells is different, on both the regular ones and the village merchants, but the prices and all that are the same it seems. The small pouch design is different from the two versions. 1.0 uses a talisman pouch design from Elden Ring, where the release version got a new design, as far as I know. Seeing as there's the Wending Graces here, and they work the same as you'd expect, right now is a good time to discuss that shortly after the release of the game, there was a patch that gave you 1 free resurrection per day when you die in solo expeditions. And obviously, that means that it wasn't available in 1.0 version. So let this be a future proof for anything that gets added to the game at a later date, including after this video is out. Merchants don't seem to have the same variety of elemental weapons in their stock. I've noticed that in the release version, usually the merchants have, give or take, one for most elements in a weapon, and a few status effect ones, and that rarely seems the case in 1.0, unless it's a weapon that already has it. In that same vein, these merchants seem to have a more limited rotation of the same weapons. I do believe release has rotations as well, but I feel like I've noticed a lot more exact repeats in 1.0 way more frequently. I'll be showing a set of different runs I've had to show what I've gotten. I don't have the data to back this up. That would take far more intricate research and data collection, which maybe at some point I'll collect and share in the comments or something. This is a trend I feel I've noticed as I play both versions. The weapons that require you to have them actively out in your hand for the passive effect to be on have a slightly different design on the icon. It's already white, but simply crossed out if it's not in your hands, where in release, it's red and then turns white without the crossout. The stairs in the Sorcerer Rises don't have railings in them in 1.0, just like in the network test and Elden Ring itself, where obviously they added some in Nightreign launch, probably to stop things like this happening. Twin Blade weapons have the same speed of animations in 1.0 as Elden Ring did back at launch of that game, before it was sped up in a later patch. The sped up version is what we have since launch in Nightreign, which is certainly interesting. It makes you wonder if maybe they started building off of this game with the day 1 patch of Elden Ring, but whether that means they started making Nightreign right away, or if they simply picked that build at a later date, is uncertain. Naturally though, this made me check the other major weapon in the class that was sped up at some point, the fist weapons. And sure enough, those were also slower in 1.0, where they were sped up in release. This change did make me think of the other patches involving weapons, namely buffs or nerfs to specific ones, like the Bloodhound Step one. So I busted out the Bloodhound Claws to check it, and surprisingly, this one seemed to be the same across both versions, having the pre-nerf speed. But another one I remembered was Ordovis' Greatsword, which originally you had to hold the Ash of War for a little while, even if you just clicked the button and let go, to be able to let go instantly for a very fast attack. And this one did have discrepancies. Having 1.0 be the older version speed from Elden Ring, and release Nightreign having the buffed speed from the later patch. I'm guessing they kept Bloodhound Step the same just because it can't be abused for PvP, and the speed of Nightreign actually fits a Bloodhound Step pretty well. It's certainly not as busted as Duchess's double dodge anyway. Doubtless there's much more examples that I don't know about or remember. Do feel free to let me know which ones you can think of. It certainly makes me wonder if, say, Rivers of Blood is as OP as it was in Elden Ring launch. The level requirement to wield rare armaments is 8 in 1.0 as opposed to 7. And even more brutally, the requirements for legendary weapons is 12 instead of 10, which will give a little peek into later info. It is quite hard to reach. The blood blobs in the blood ruins don't drop items or weapons, where they would in release. Seppuku takes up far less health from you when you trigger it in 1.0, which I kinda like actually. Health can be so valuable in this game, and having such a big chunk of it being taken from you can be very punishing, especially at lower levels. The title of the bosses over the health bar is indented, where in release they all seem pretty flush. I know, insane detail to notice, but hey, why not mention it? Evergels don't drop boss rewards when you kill the corresponding bosses, you just get the runes and a grace, so they're by far less useful than they are at launch. It's like this in a network test as well. Speaking of, the boss reward window is different, just a few design changes. And similarly, the icons for the personal buffs are different from what they would become later on. It was also like this in a network test. The instant death effect you can get as a personal buff will cause a destined death visual effect on the enemies, instead of a deathlight one. No sound effect plays when you get the level lost prompt. Nor is the whole level circle red when you do. It's just a number and a little red circle around it. Same in a network test. Now to look at some of the day bosses, the wave of enemies right before the Knight's Cavalry has 3 omens instead of 2. Enemies and bosses sometimes don't have the audio and visual effect on their grabs. There were some that did, and some that didn't, so I'm guessing they didn't finish implementing it. Cutting Gaping Dragon's tail doesn't drop weapons or items it seems, as it would in release, and, well, Dark Souls even. The HP debuff you get from Gaping isn't shown as graying of the health bar as it is at launch. It just cuts the size of the bar entirely. It also shows the number of stacked debuffs you have, where it doesn't in release. This could just be unlucky, but I never had Duxie or Freya set up the spiderweb area around her in 1.0. This next one is likely just a bug, but it's not one I've gotten yet on release I think. I died once to the Demi-Human Day boss setup, and when I revived, the swordman got stuck outside the circle, and I was able to kill the queen before re-engaging the swordsman. Whenever you kill the day bosses, you don't automatically full heal like you do in release. You have to physically touch the grace that spawns there. The rain takes longer to clear out after defeating the boss than it does at release. You also don't stop taking damage from being in the rain until it's completely cleared away. In release, it stops roughly halfway into the animation of the rain clearing. The tree that hangs above the day 2 boss area is pretty much touching the ground in 1.0. In release, it would be a little bit elevated from the ground. It was also like this in a network test. In 1.0, the game doesn't actually despawn the field bosses that are surrounding the day 2 boss once you kill it, and are ready to go into the Nightlord. And finally, before Gladius, when you exit the game during a solo expedition, it asks to save game instead of leave session. Given I'm not sure there's anything to save if you leave the expedition early, it's probably a good word change. Now onto Gladius himself. The only real change I noticed is that although he does seem to be weak to holy damage, there isn't the usual feedback for that, even if he staggers during the split up phase and stuff. So without the information in the expedition page, and no audio or visual indicators, it'd be difficult to realize he's particularly weak to holy damage. Here's a bonus fact that I happened to notice from the network test specifically. In both 1.0 and release versions, every Nightlord starts out with a generic night sky background, and then get a custom one depending on the fight once you reach phase 2. But in the network test, Gladius starts out with a unique skybox, and obviously keeps it in the whole fight. Defeating Gladius or any Nightlord doesn't grant a trace of night key item upon defeat like it does on release. Somewhat predictably, since we already covered that there's no key items menu, so you wouldn't be able to look at it. Either way, I think this item is essentially just a story marker, letting you know how many bosses you've killed to unlock the final boss. And the number you need to kill is the same as release version anyway, so ultimately it doesn't change much. The shifting earth introduction text prompt is somewhat different, though it's mostly just rewarding. Some of the prompts are slightly different in one way or another, but this is the most noteworthy one when put side by side. Some of the dialogue the Nightfarers have after clearing the first expedition didn't seem to happen, though some others did, so I do get the suspicion that they added some dialogue later on in development. When you unlock the different skins wardrobe mirror thing from killing 2 Nightlords, in release you normally have the Iron Manial tell you as you spawn into the Roundtable, but in 1.0 you just get the prompt, though you can talk to the menial to give you that dialogue. The unique character relics don't have the name grayed out when you're in the wrong character, but I suspect you don't get the effect nonetheless. Okay, now that we've opened up the game, we're going to focus on the shifting earth differences, then the map raid events, and finally the rest of the Nightlords, then go into the endgame. The current shifting earth doesn't show in the expedition window, you just have to notice it when you first load up in the Roundtable. There's the extra option at the bottom of the expedition window after you kill Gladius, like the one that lets you choose the last expedition done, undefeated Nightlords, etc., instead of being in the options button. Going into the shifting earths, starting with Crater, and the west side of the crater, below the left side church, in release there's consistently a Valiant Gargoyle boss right here, but in 1.0, that seems to consistently turn into a magma worm instead. The only other change I noticed for Crater is that there's less chariots in this hallway going into the base of the volcano, and they're all in the back of it. Besides that, everything else is the same. You can still turn a weapon into legendary here. For the mountain area, the only change I noticed is that the snow can sometimes look more flat in some areas. For example, where the day 2 boss spawns. You can see that there's less grass and rock and stuff like that peeks through the snow and adds texture. There actually wasn't any changes in the rotten woods that I could find in itself, but I did have this day 2 boss literally fight a normal formidable boss, like he took his eyes off of me and just targeted the boss until it was dead. Yeah. I feel like I've seen the day bosses occasionally target things outside that area, but this is definitely next level. Maybe it's worth keeping bosses near the day 2 boss region alive for this purpose. I don't know. Now Noclateo is where all the real changes are, although mostly minor ones. Firstly, there's no Loretta next to the city at all it seems. I never spotted her in 1.0. The dragon to the south isn't there either. There's no merchant near the entrance of Noclateo in that one spot. The malformed star throws rocks at you for such a long time. Not only longer than the release version, but even longer than Elden Ring it seems. Really excessive. Going into the right side of the city, meaning going north in the map, the Mausoleum Knight that's there near the beginning that drops a boss reward is there, but he's more hidden. You kinda have to seek him out or draw him out by fighting things around him and letting him hear you. Where in release you can usually just run through and he pops up in front of you. The Black Knife Assassin that pops up a little later in this path is changed to a Mausoleum Knight, although it doesn't drop a Grace, as it's not considered a proper boss I guess. On the opposite end of the map, on the left, or south, there was no Mausoleum Knight boss at all at that time. There was also no Black Knife Assassin on this end either, so it seemed like the right path is a more beneficial one. As far as I've seen, there were no scarabs in the city at all. I tend to find at least one in the city in release, be it in this roof or in the beginning water drain area, but not in 1.0. Also didn't find a scarab in like the crater, but I feel less confident that was a consistent change, or maybe I got unlucky. Right before the Estel stairway, neither of the double Mausoleum Knights drop boss rewards. Estel is already out and waiting for you in his arena, instead of spawning when you get closer. The reward you get from Noclateo is from Estel's item drop instead of being in the back of the room, as there is no room in there whatsoever. But, turns out, this Noclateo revive is either bugged or doesn't do anything, because I tried triggering it twice, and I just failed the expedition. So Noclateo may just be a complete waste of time compared to some of the other shifting earths in this version, and certainly compared to release. Now going into the random raid events, there's a few changes to the Cataclysms. Firstly, the circle on the map is more purple than blue. The cloud effect over the affected area is different, looks much less intimidating, but I did find one occasion where the design matched more closely to what's at release. I think it's still different, but maybe this means that the type of camp affects how the cloud looks. The sludge pillars look different in 1.0 as well. The condemned invader enemies seem far easier in 1.0. It seems like it might be very doable in level 1 or just a bit above, compared to what we have now. The invaders only drop +1 weapons as far as I've seen, where they drop +2s in release. The giant bubbles didn't really seem to spawn near you. I think they only spawn near the main spot they teleport you to. Everything else about it seemed the same though. The Curse of a Demon event doesn't Five Nights jump scare you with the lever.png, it just gives you the usual filter. Same goes for when it's lifted, no image. When you look at his menu, you get other options alongside lifting the curse, where normally you only get the lifting curse at first. If I was smart, I would have picked one of these to see what happens, to see if maybe you keep the curse but you get another benefit, but I didn't think to try that, and unfortunately I didn't get this event again so far. At least on day 1, the cost of lifting the curse is 25,000 runes instead of 15,000. Unsure what it is for day 2, as I said, they didn't get it again. The Flame of Frenzy event works almost identically to how the Frenzy Tower works in Elden Ring, as in, when you're out of the line of sight, you're safe, but otherwise the madness buildup is just as fast as Elden Ring. I'm definitely glad they tweaked this for a release version, because it is far too punishing here, and killing the enemies on top seems to be enough to finish the event. There's also not as much of a heavy atmosphere in 1.0 as there is in release, as it doesn't turn the whole area red. And finally for the events, before the second night threatens the new thing, you will get a grace to heal and level up before you get the second boss, but then it disappears obviously. In release version, you just heal automatically, so you don't quite need the grace, but it does mean you have to survive without being able to level up first. For 1.0, this does mean if you're impatient, that you could find yourself running off before the night clears, and have to run back to the circle. So there's probably another reason they didn't spawn the grace later on, to avoid you doing this, and potentially losing a run over this. Alright, we're finally going to the rest of the Nightlords. Starting with Gaping Jaw, Adele, the boss does get poisoned pretty frequently, and he will puke it out like he does in release version, but he doesn't get staggered in phase 1 when you manage the poison. For the only other change I've found, I will issue a very explicit epilepsy warning, because it's definitely pretty bad compared to normal gameplay. When he transitions to phase 2, there's a flashing effect going on that doesn't really seem intentional, even with the whole lighting theme, and it does go a little bit into phase 2 itself. This is not really like this in release. We're going to continue the epilepsy warning going into Sentient Pest, as this phase 2 transition also has a flashing in it, but that's the last one I noticed, thankfully. The only other change for Sentient Pest is that I got them to die as they were staggered twice. They didn't immediately go into the dying animations, they had to finish their stagger. In release version, I've had them die during a stagger, and they simply skip the stagger and go into the dying animation. For Augur Marius, the glowing eyeball is a little bit glitchy, as it looks like there's something blocking it sometimes when it's moving it around. I didn't notice anything like that in release. The spin attack the boss does seem to accelerate them much faster, making it harder to avoid in release. The jellyfish that follow you during it turned out to be a goddamn nightmare. In release version, they don't track you super hard. You can simply walk away from them and you'll probably be safe. But in 1.0, they track you much harder, to the point where running sometimes isn't enough, resulting in you taking a lot more chip damage from them, which adds up for sure. That is also not to mention the fact that as far as I could tell, the boss spawns them far more frequently too, borderline spamming the attack. So yeah, it was awful. The jellyfish also don't light up before exploding, and they seem to explode faster once they're set to explode. The jellyfish hands' heads got bigger when they took damage. I wasn't able to replicate this on release version, aside of when the whole boss dies, but it happened a lot in 1.0. When the hands die, at least the first few ones drop weapons and items when you kill them, I noticed. As far as I know, at launch they didn't drop anything. Augur didn't do the sleepy attack until the very end of the fight in 1.0, but it does seem worse, and a lot faster to build sleep, costing me a run at least once. But I guess thankfully it's rarer, so you can save an ult for it. For Equilibrious Beast Libra, the floor glyphs that blow up in your feet blew up very slightly faster, which would be hard to tell just from watching, but you can certainly feel it when you're playing. The only other change I noticed is that when you get the passive Madness build-up attack, the Madness speed seems the same, but Libra didn't seem to spawn the curing crystals very much, making it harder to get by. Or maybe just didn't spawn them near you? I don't know, I could've just gotten unlucky in this regard, but it's never been this bad for me in release version. For Dark Drift Night Fulgur, the wind effect on the sword isn't as pronounced. So it's a little harder to hear that it's coming if you're not looking directly at it. When he does the running pillars of light from the ground attack, in 1.0 he only does 3 running sprees, and in the third one he turns around and explodes the ground with his stomp, instead of it being set off automatically. In release, he does 3 identical runs with explosions behind him, and then there's a 4th one that he creates in front of him, instead of behind where he runs, and that's what he explodes with his stomp. The second phase transition attack, and this attack in general, doesn't leave as much of a purple cloud behind. For Fissure in the Fog Caligo, the rocks that you're supposed to use for cover during the big snow attack aren't the giant glaciers that we have now. They're the same rock models that Falling Star Beast uses, so obviously they didn't get a chance to design these custom glaciers until a later date, or they changed their mind and realized they should. They definitely stuck out like a sore thumb in this fight. The other Phase 1 super tech where he summons the giant icicles above you doesn't have 2 different layers you have to watch out for, so no ice sheet, just the icicles. The Phase 2 Flying Crystal attack is different. Instead of shooting a random barrage of ice at you, it shoots 6 big crystals at the ground and then creates icicles where it lands, and it only does 2 volleys. I noticed that during the fight, sometimes the crystals in the ground grow to jumbo sizes before disappearing, where they didn't grow to that size in release. I also never triggered a stagger from the fire damage at all. No doubt it still is weak to fire, but didn't have any unique effect, just like some of the previous changes. Alright, we're going to quickly go through some of the Roundtable changes once you unlock the final boss, and then go right ahead into Night Aspect for the endgame. The effect around the Roundtable Hold Grace is somewhat different in the cutscene after you defeat 4 Nightlords. Some of the priestess dialogue after the cutscene doesn't match the subtitles.
The time has come. Now we face a god. It will be unlike any other battle. But I have faith in our great champions. May we live to see the break of dawn.
But I believe this is a different voiceover take entirely, as the delivery is different for some lines that match the release version.
The time has come. The time has come. It will be unlike any other battle. But I have faith. It will be unlike any other battle. But I have faith.
So maybe they had her re-record rewritten dialogue here. When you talk to her afterwards, she does have one additional line in 1.0 that seems to be cut from release.
In truth, I doubted that anyone would accept the demands made of them.
They also added an additional but to the following 1.0 line to have it flow more smoothly from that cut line.
But you, for one, were up to the task. And for that, you have my deepest gratitude.
The Roundtable itself does look darker, and the grace has a purple effect on it, but the area itself doesn't seem to have the same amount of dust effect around as release. The character's final battle dialogue in the Roundtable is a little inconsistent. Sometimes they say it right away, sometimes you have to talk to them for a bit to get it out of them. Alright, finally for Hail's Store, the end of this combo doesn't end with a twirl, it's an upward slash instead, which seems much more fair. The twirl sucks. The shockwave in both of his slams seems to be one individual big hit, rather than a smaller AoE next to him, followed by lines of earth shattering. And lastly, the same one as some of the prior Nightlords, he just doesn't have proper telegraphing of elemental weaknesses. So going into the ending, I noticed this ending Roundtable Hold is completely grayscaled 1.0, where in release it's more of a sepia tone, or something around there. The beginning of the cutscene in release shows colors in the skyline behind the corpse, but in 1.0, it also keeps it as grayscale. During this cutscene, this object is blocking a little bit of the screen in release version, where it's not there in 1.0. I know it's a very weird detail to notice, but it's somewhat obvious when you use the overlap method in editing to spot differences. This is really stupid, but the 1.0 background isn't completely black like release. It's more grayish. I did briefly scan the credits. They seem to be the same, maybe with just different spacing between lines here and there, so it's hard to check by overlapping for any discrepancies. I'm not going to check them all. The credit videos does end at the same time, so I assume they are the same, but I will play them all in their entirety at the end of the video if you would like to verify yourself. Now that we're done with the game, some general observations about the 1.0 version. It took me a while to get a measure of this, but getting levels seems harder in 1.0. I only reached above level 10 less than 5 times I think, so it's definitely more balanced for solo play by the launch of the game. I think generally you get less runes, as I did check if leveling took more runes, and it didn't seem to. And it makes sense when you consider things like Everjoe's not dropping extra rewards and stuff. I found I had to very specifically focus on rune farming to hit level 15 eventually, for instance. On a similar note, I did find the whole 1.0 version a little tougher than release, but not as bad as I thought it would be. You can definitely make do most of the time, but it does help getting Wending Graces. And final note, this version definitely seems more prone to really bad frame drops, and consistently so. There was a day or two where after just playing for like 5 minutes, it started getting choppy, and it almost always stayed that way, no matter what I did. making it almost unplayable. It seemed to lag my whole console, and sometimes closing the game kept the console choppy too, needing to reset that as well. So I am worried that it could be the heat or something. It is in the middle of summer right now. But I didn't have this be as consistently an issue when playing on whatever current patch I'm playing on PlayStation 5. So note that there's at least some performance enhancements. If you made it this far, no doubt you also enjoyed the other 1.0 videos I've made so far. And as mentioned, Dark Souls 1 is coming at a later date this year. So if you want to catch that, make sure to subscribe. I've got a few more Nightreign video ideas coming in the meantime. But yeah, thanks for watching. I hope to see you again. Take care.
Mm-hmm.